my daughter yelled. "Get out of my life." And every word hurt like a knife going through my 65 years of complete love for her. She was standing in the living room of our house. Wedding dress magazines were spread all over the floor like dying flower petals. Emily pointed at me with a shaking finger full of anger. Daniel, the man she was going to marry, smiled from the couch. He looked happy, like he thought he already owned everything that was mine. "You never understand anything, Mom. You're just in the way," she yelled. Her screams bounced off the walls. I had painted these walls 20 years ago in this house that I built piece by piece, working extra hours at the cloth factory. The afternoon felt heavy. The air was thick like sticky honey. I stood quietly as she kept saying mean things. The words flew out of her mouth like bullets aimed right at my heart. But something strange happened right then. I stopped hurting inside. A cold, calm feeling started to fill my chest. I didn't cry. I just squeezed my car keys until they dug into my hand. I felt the warm metal against my skin while Daniel nodded, agreeing with every mean thing my own daughter said to me. "Your mother is so dramatic," he whispered to Emily, but I heard every word. His eyes shined with greed. I should have noticed this months ago when he started coming to the house more often, looking around at everything with his eyes and asking about papers that were none of his business. The next day, very early, when water drops were still on my bedroom windows and the city was just waking up with its first sounds, I put on my best dark blue coat and walked to the bank. My steps were strong on the wet sidewalk. Each step was a choice I was making for the first time in many years, just for myself. The morning air was fresh and cleared my lungs and my mind. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe all the way. The bank worker looked at me strangely when I asked her to block all the extra credit cards I had given Emily over the years. Her fingers stopped over the keyboard as she looked at the list. The main card, the emergency one, the one for shopping online. All those little pieces of plastic I had given with a mother's love. Now I understood they had been like golden chains tying me to people using me without saying it. "Are you sure, Mrs. Linda? There are several cards, and some have things being bought right now," she asked in a soft voice. She leaned forward with that work like worry they use when they think you're making a mistake. "Completely sure," I said. My voice sounded different, like I had found a way of talking I had lost long ago. The words came out strong and surprised me, like they had been waiting years to be said with that strength. When I left the bank, the morning sun warmed my face in a way I hadn't remembered feeling in years. It was like I had woken up from a very long dream where I was just a shadow paying bills and making meals for people who had forgotten to say thank you. Every bit of light seemed to go through layers of built-up tiredness, lighting up corners of my soul I thought were lost forever. I went back home and sat in my favorite chair by the window. It looks out at the garden where I planted jasmine flowers when Emily was little and still hugged me before bed. My phone started ringing over and over. My daughter's name flashed on the screen again and again like a desperate cry for help. But for the first time in my life, I didn't run to answer it. Each ring was like a faraway echo of a life that wasn't mine anymore. A song I had danced to for many years but had finally decided to stop listening to. There was something really freeing in that chosen silence, in not doing what others expected. The house felt different that morning, like it had gotten back its original soul. The one it had when it was just mine and not a stage for other people's drama. 2 weeks before Emily yelled at me in my own house, everything seemed normal. She had come on a Saturday morning with a big smile, carrying bags from an expensive bakery downtown and flowers that cost more than what I spent on food in a week. "Mom, I brought you your favorites," she said, kissing my cheek with a sweetness I now know was fake. The roses were perfect. Too perfect, like they had been picked not for love, but for how they looked. Daniel came a few minutes later, carrying a bottle of bubbly wine and that smile that had always seemed strange to me. It didn't reach his eyes. It just stayed on his lips like a mask that didn't fit right. "Ms. Linda, you look beautiful," he said. Even though his words sounded nice, there was something in his voice that made me feel like I was being looked at like an object for sale. I should have paid attention to how his eyes looked around my living room, staying on the glass cabinet where I keep the family photos, on the solid wood table I got from my mother. "We have wonderful news," Emily said, taking my hands in hers. Her fingers were cold even though the morning was warm. She wore a new ring that sparkled so much it made me blink. Daniel officially asked me to marry him, Mom. We want a wedding like the one I always dreamed of, like the one you never got to have. That last sentence stuck in my chest like a sharp splinter. It was true. My wedding had been simple, almost plain. But it had been beautiful because it was filled with real love. Now I wonder if that comparison was on purpose. If even then she was planting the seed of guilt she would later use to control me. Daniel sat on my couch like he owned it, stretching his arms over the back with a comfort that made me uncomfortable. Emily has told me so much about you, about everything you've done for her. A mother like you deserves to see her daughter get married in style. His words sounded practiced, like a speech he had said in front of the mirror. Every compliment came wrapped with a hidden request. Every smile was a bill piling up somewhere in my future. We've been looking at party places, Emily continued, pulling out her phone and showing me pictures of fancy halls with crystal chandeliers and tables covered in cloths that looked like they cost more than what I make in a month. This one is perfect, Mom. Can hold 200 people. It has a garden for photos and the menu. Her eyes sparkled as she talked about food with names I couldn't say, wines I had only seen in fancy magazines. The number 200 hit me like a quiet slap. I knew at most 20 people from her current group of friends. It must be very expensive, I said quietly. But my words were lost in Emily's fake excitement as she kept looking through photos like she hadn't heard me. Daniel nodded at each picture, making comments about how good the service was, how special the place was, how important it was to make a good impression. You only get married once, right? He said, winking at me. You have to do it right. It was then that I noticed Daniel had been looking at my house with too much attention. His eyes stayed on the house ownership papers I had left on the dining room table after checking some tax papers. He walked over casually, pretending to look at the family photos, but I saw his fingers touch the paper. What a beautiful house, Mrs. Linda. It must be worth a lot of money in today's market. It's my home, I replied. Something in my voice must have warned him because he quickly moved away, going back to acting like the perfect future son-in-law. But I had seen that look, that quiet thinking about my things. It was the same look I had seen at the bank when I asked for a loan years ago. The look that counts numbers and possibilities, not the one that likes memories and feelings. Emily came closer to me with that smile I now see as dangerous. Mom, I need to ask you a favor. Well, it's not really a favor. It's more like putting money into my happiness. Her words were carefully chosen. Each one placed carefully to make me feel selfish if I said no. We need help with the wedding costs. You know, Daniel is just starting his business. And I. Her voice broke a little like she was holding back tears. I just want you to be proud of me. The silence that followed was heavy, full of things we weren't saying. Daniel watched me with that smile I now understand was like a hunter's. Emily waited for my answer with her eyes shining with tears that seemed too perfect in their timing. I should have said no right then. I should have trusted that voice inside screaming at me that something was wrong. But a mother's love, that blind, giving everything love I had grown for 35 years, made me nod. Of course, my love. I'll do whatever I can to give you the wedding of your dreams, I told them that morning. The words left my mouth like they were automatic, programmed by many years of giving everything for my daughter. I saw Daniel's eyes light up with a happiness that should have worried me. Emily hugged me with too much excitement that I now understand was more relief than thankfulness. I knew I could count on you, Mom. You're the best mother in the world. It was the next day that things started to get strange. Emily came with a folder full of price lists, bills, and contracts that needed just a little signature. It's to book everything quickly, Mom. The best places get taken fast, she explained, spreading the papers across my dining room table. The same table where I had helped her with homework when she was little. The numbers danced before my eyes like impossible amounts. The party place, the food, the flowers, the photographer, the music. Each thing was a small fortune that added up to a mountain of costs that would keep me up at night for years. Don't you think this is a bit too much? I asked, pointing to the cost of the flower decorations, which was the same as 3 months of my retirement check. Emily sighed with that fake patience grown-ups use when explaining something obvious to a child. Mom, it's my wedding. I'm only going to get married once in my life. Besides, you never had this. Don't you want me to be happy? Guilt sat in my chest like a hot stone. She was right. I never had a fancy wedding. My marriage had been a simple ceremony at the neighborhood church with a family lunch afterward. But it had been beautiful because it was filled with real love, not this planned show they were presenting to me. Daniel started showing up more and more, always with new wedding ideas that needed more money. Mrs. Linda, I found the best band in the city. They play at famous people's weddings, he would say, showing me videos on his phone of musicians who looked like they came from a Hollywood movie. We just need a first payment to get them. His hands moved with big motions as he spoke, like he was selling a dream. But I was starting to see the cracks in his act. His shoes were expensive but worn out. His watch shined, but it was a cheap copy. He always had an excuse for not paying for any of the costs himself. It was a Thursday afternoon when I found the first real lie. Emily had left her purse open on my couch while she went to the bathroom. Her phone buzzed with a message. I didn't mean to read it, but the screen lit up right in front of my eyes. I saw Daniel's name followed by words that sent a cold chill down my back. It's all set. The old lady is paying for everything. After the wedding, we can pressure her about the house. My hands started to shake. I read the message over and over, hoping I had understood it wrong. But the words stayed there, unchanging like a punishment. The old lady. That's what the man who was going to marry my daughter called me. The man who smiled and called me Mrs. Linda with fake respect. And the house, my house, the home I had built with so much hard work was part of their plans. When Emily came back from the bathroom, I acted like nothing had happened. Smiled. I nodded at her new wedding ideas. I signed another check for the photographer who absolutely had to be that one because his style was special. But inside something had changed. It was like I had woken up from a deep sleep and started seeing things with painful clearness. Every smile from Daniel seemed more fake. Every hug from Emily felt more planned. Every new request for money sounded more practiced. I started paying attention to things I had ignored before. Like the way Daniel's eyes measured my old furniture. Or how Emily made comments about how messy my house was, suggesting that maybe I needed help getting organized. Mom, you don't have the energy you used to. Maybe you should think about moving into something smaller, easier to take care of, she told me one afternoon while pretending to help me clean the kitchen shelves. This house is perfect for me, I replied. But she kept going with that smile I now see as controlling. But think about it, Mom. All this space just for you. You could sell it and have money to enjoy yourself, to travel to. Her words stopped when she saw my face. For the first time in weeks, I didn't give in to her suggestions. I didn't smile like I agreed. I just looked at her with a coldness that seemed to surprise her. That night, alone in my bed, I looked at all the checks I had signed in recent weeks. The total was scary. It was years of savings, going without things, meals not eaten, clothes not bought, trips not taken. All that money I had saved for when I'm old, for emergencies, for a little safety, was disappearing into a wedding that was beginning to look more like a trick than a celebration. It was then that I truly began to see what was happening. It wasn't just an expensive wedding. It was a carefully planned trick to empty my bank accounts and eventually take my house. And I, like a fool in love with the idea of being the perfect mother, had been paying for my own destruction. The getting worse began the following week when Daniel came to my house with a new folder and that smile I had learned to fear. Mrs. Linda, I have amazing news, he said, sitting on my couch like he owned it. The party place had someone cancel at the last minute, and they can give us a better date. But we need to say yes today. His eyes shined with a fake rush as he spread out contracts that needed my signature right away. Emily appeared behind him, glowing and nervous at the same time. Mom, it's perfect. It's a Saturday instead of a Friday, so many more people will be able to come. But the cost? Her voice trailed off as she pointed to a number that made me dizzy. It was double what we had already spent, an amount that was basically my entire life savings. "We just need you to sign here and here," Daniel said, pointing to lines marked with little X's. "And we can have the wedding of our dreams. Can't you wait a little?" "I need to check my money," I said quietly. But Daniel shook his head with that fake worried look he had perfected. "Unfortunately not, Mrs. Linda. Another customer is waiting for our answer. If we don't sign today, we lose the chance forever." Emily came closer and took my hands. Her eyes filled with tears that seemed far too perfectly timed. "Please, Mom. You know how important this is to me. After everything I've been through, after all my failures, this is my chance to be happy. Sign." God forgive me. But I signed those papers that put my future at risk because I couldn't stand to see my daughter cry. Or what I thought were real tears. Because now I understand that Emily had learned to use my feelings as weapons against me. The moment the ink dried on my signature, I saw Daniel and Emily exchange a winning look. A silent conversation that completely left me out. 2 days later, Daniel started showing up at my house without calling first. "I was just in the neighborhood," he'd say. But he always ended up staying the whole afternoon, making business calls from my living room, using my internet, eating from my refrigerator. "I hope you don't mind, Mrs. Linda. Emily told me you love the company." But I had never said that. In fact, I was beginning to value my quiet time alone more and more, especially when he wasn't there, looking at my belongings with that counting gaze. "You know, Mrs. Linda," he said to me one afternoon while checking his phone on my couch, "Emily and I have been thinking about the future. After the wedding, we'll need a bigger place to start our family." His words sounded casual, but there was something planned in the way he said them, like he had been practicing this moment. "This house is perfect for a young family. It has a lot of space, a good neighborhood, and it's in great shape." "It's my home," I replied. But he continued like he hadn't heard me. Of course. But think about it. You all alone in this big house. It must be a lot of work to keep up. You must feel very lonely sometimes." I didn't feel lonely until he started showing up constantly, filling my space with his pushy presence and unwanted plans. "We could make an arrangement that helps everyone. You could move into a comfortable apartment, easier to take care of, and we could stay here taking care of the place." The following week, Emily came with a suggestion that left me speechless. "Mom, Daniel and I have been looking at our money situation, and I think it would be a good idea for you to add me as a co-owner on your bank accounts. Just in case, for emergencies." Her voice sounded sweet, but there was a hidden pushiness that made me feel like I was being tricked into a trap. "At your age, it's important to have someone who can help you with these things." "At my age? I'm 65, not 90, I replied more sharply than I meant to. "I handle my own business perfectly fine." But she kept going with that smile I now see as controlling. "Of course you do, Mom. But think of it as being careful. And besides, it would be easier for the wedding costs. You wouldn't have to keep signing checks all the time." Daniel nodded from his usual spot on my couch. "It's very common, Mrs. Linda. My mother did the same thing with me. It's just a formality, a way to make things simpler." But I remembered his mother. A woman who had lost control of her money when he moved into her house, and who now lived basically as a guest in her own home. It was that night I found Daniel in my kitchen going through the papers I kept in the important documents drawer. "Excuse me, Mrs. Linda," he said when he saw me. "I was looking for a glass of water and the drawer opened by accident." But I had seen how he was taking pictures of my documents with his phone. How he was looking at my house papers and my bank statements like someone taking notes of what's there. "What are you really doing?" he asked. And for the first time since I'd known him, his mask slipped a little. "Just trying to understand the overall money situation so I can better help with the wedding costs," he replied. But he no longer sounded believable. His smile had become forced. His eyes had that hardness I now see as the true personality behind the act. The next day, Emily came with the news that they had found the perfect dress at a special store. It costs a little more than we had planned, she admitted. But Mom, when I put it on, even the sales lady cried. It's like it was made for me. The price of the dress was ridiculous. The same as 6 months of my retirement check. But she had already put it on hold and just needed me to go pay the first payment. Emily, this is getting out of control, I finally said. Her face changed from sweet to dangerous in seconds. Out of control. Mom, it's my wedding, the only one I'm ever going to have. Are you telling me I'm not worth it? Her words were like knives wrapped in blame. Each one designed to make me feel like the worst mother in the world. And it worked because despite everything, despite the warning bells screaming in my head, I went to the store and paid for that dress that cost more than my car. That night, after paying for the dress, I came home feeling like I had crossed an invisible line I could not come back from. I sat on my bed, surrounded by bills and receipts from a wedding that seemed to have turned into a monster eating my future. And I made a decision that would change everything. I took out my phone and called my lawyer's number. The same one who had handled buying my house 20 years ago. Mr. Robert, it's Linda Morales. I need to see you urgently, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. It's about my documents, my property. I think I need to protect what I own. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then his professional yet warm voice calmed me. Of course, Mrs. Linda. Can you come in tomorrow morning? Bring all the documents you have, especially anything you've signed recently. The next day, while Emily and Daniel thought I was at the market buying groceries, I went to Mr. Roberts' office. The building was old but solid like my lawyer. His office smelled of legal paper and strong coffee. Tell me what's going on, he said. And for the first time in weeks, someone listened to me without judging me, without trying to convince me of anything, without a hidden plan behind their words. I told him everything. The too expensive wedding costs, Daniel's constant visits, his comments about my house, the pressure for Emily to become a co-owner of my accounts. I took out all the contracts I had signed, all the checks I had written, and spread them on his desk as proof of my own foolishness. Mrs. Linda, he said after carefully looking at everything, you are a victim of what we call family money abuse. It's more common than you think. But what can I do? She's my daughter, I said. The words came out carrying all the guilt and pain I had been holding. A mother's love doesn't mean you have to destroy yourself money-wise. He replied with a gentleness that made me cry for the first time in weeks. We are going to protect what you own. We are going to make sure that no one can make money decisions in your name without you clearly saying yes. That afternoon as I walked back home I felt different. It was like I had found an invisible armor that protected me from being controlled. I had a plan now. Documents to back up my decisions. And more importantly, I had the certainty that I wasn't crazy. That my gut feelings had been right all along. When I got home, I found Daniel and Emily in my living room, surrounded by more magazines and contracts. Mom, good you're here, Emily said with that smile I could now see for what it really was. Tool to control me. Daniel found the perfect flower person, but we need to make the first payment today. Her eyes shined with that fake rush I knew so well. How much? Asked, keeping my voice calm. Only $15,000, Daniel replied like it was a tiny amount. It's for all the flowers for the ceremony and the party. Believe me, Mrs. Linda, it's going to be amazing. Your daughter will look like a princess. But I was no longer listening to his empty promises. I was thinking that those $15,000 was almost a year of my retirement check. I need to think about it, I told them. I saw them exchange a worried look. Think about it, Emily repeated. Her voice had lost all its sweetness. Mom, we've already talked about this. It's my wedding. You can't change your mind now. But for the first time in months, I wasn't scared by her tone. I can change my mind whenever I want. It's my money. Daniel stood up from the couch with a look that no longer tried to hide his annoyance. Linda, I think you're being a little selfish. Emily is your only daughter. Don't you want to see her happy? His words were the same as always, but now they sounded empty, like a broken record that had lost its power to convince. I want to see my daughter happy, I replied. But not at the cost of my money safety. Your money safety. Emily jumped to her feet. For the first time I saw real anger in her eyes, not the fake tears from before. Mom, you have this house. You have savings. You have your retirement check. What more do you need at your age? I'm starting my life. I have the right to have something beautiful for once. And I have the right not to be left poor to pay for your show, I replied. The words came out with a force that surprised me. The silence that followed was tense, filled with all the things we had been avoiding saying. Daniel's fists were squeezed tight. Emily looked at me like I were a stranger. Okay, Daniel finally said in a dangerously calm voice. I understand you need time to think about it. But Mrs. Linda, I hope you understand that some promises are already made. Some contracts are already signed. You can't back out without problems. His words sounded like a barely hidden threat. Are you threatening me in my own house? Yes. His mask slipped completely. It's not a threat, Mrs. Linda. It's reality. You have signed contracts. You have made promises. You can't just decide you don't want to keep them anymore. Emily nodded. I saw a hardness in her face I had never seen before, like she were finally showing her true personality. That night, after they left, I stayed up looking at all the papers Mr. Robert had given me. I had choices, had rights, and more importantly, I had the determination to use them. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a 65-year-old woman who had worked her whole life, raised a daughter, built a home, and was not going to let anyone take all that from her without a fight. The next morning, as the sun barely peeked through my bedroom curtains, I began to carry out my plan with the quiet exactness of someone who has made a final decision. It was Saturday. I knew Daniel and Emily would sleep in late, which gave me time to do what I needed without interruptions. I put on my best dark blue suit, the one I saved for important times, because I sensed this day would mark a before and after in my life. My first stop was the bank. The same worker who had blocked the credit cards greeted me with a professional smile. Good morning, Mrs. Linda. How can I help you today? I explained that I needed to look at all the activity in my accounts for the last 3 months and get official copies of each transaction. I also need to change all my access codes and make it so that no one but me can make transactions on my accounts, I said, sliding over the documents Mr. Robert had prepared for me. While I waited for the statements, I checked my phone and found 12 missed calls from Emily and 5 messages from Daniel. Mom, where are you? We need to talk urgently about the flowers. Mrs. Linda, the flower person is waiting for an answer. We can't waste any more time. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel that fake rush they were trying to make me feel. Their emergencies were no longer my emergencies. On the way home, I stopped at an electronics store and bought a small digital recorder. The young, friendly salesman explained how to use it. It's very easy, ma'am. Just press this button and it records everything. The battery lasts for hours and the sound quality is great. I paid him in cash and put the device in my purse, feeling like I had just bought a secret weapon. When I got home, Daniel and Emily were already waiting for me in my living room. They had used the key I had given my daughter years ago when I still believed it was for real emergencies. Now I understood that key had been just another way to get in that they had been using. Mom, where were you? We've been waiting all morning, Emily said with badly hidden impatience. I was taking care of some personal business, I replied, quietly turning on the recorder as I sat in my favorite chair. Business that should include us. Daniel stepped in with that authority he had been slowly taking in my house. We're family, Mrs. Linda. You shouldn't make important decisions without asking us. His words showed just how far they had gone in invading my independence. Daniel, you are not my family yet. And when you are, you still won't have the right to an opinion on my money, I said with a calmness that seemed to confuse him. Emily quickly stepped in like they had practiced this conversation. Mom, you've been acting very strangely lately. We're worried about you. Maybe you should see a doctor, check your mental state. The suggestion hit me like cold ice water. They were trying to plant doubts about my mental ability, likely preparing the ground for possibly saying legally that I couldn't take care of myself. My mental state is perfectly clear, I replied. So clear that I have decided to cancel my money help with this wedding. The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. What does that mean exactly? Daniel asked. His voice had lost all pretending to be nice. It means I'm not paying another dollar towards the costs of this wedding. You can continue with your plans, but you'll have to pay for them yourselves. Emily turned pale. I saw the entire fake front they had built for months fall apart. You can't do that, Emily screamed, jumping up. You already signed contracts. You already promised. You're going to make us look bad with all the sellers. But I had expected this reaction and had my answer ready. I signed those contracts based on incomplete information and under emotional pressure. My lawyer has told me that I can cancel my part. Daniel came closer to me with a look that no longer tried to hide his anger. Mrs. Linda, I think you're making a very serious mistake. There are legal promises involved here. You could face serious problems if you don't do what you signed. His words sounded like a direct threat. But I was no longer the scared woman from a week ago. Are you legally threatening me in my own house? I asked, making sure the recorder caught every word. It's not a threat, it's a fact. You signed contracts that tie all of us. His arrogance was amazing. He had gone from pretending to be a respectful future son-in-law to acting like he owned my life and my decisions. Emily started to cry, but these tears were different from the controlling ones before. These were tears of frustration and rage. Mom, how could you do this to me? After everything we've planned, after everything we've dreamed of, you're going to ruin my wedding. You're going to ruin my life. Her words were loaded with poison, each one designed to make me feel guilty. I'm not ruining your wedding, Emily. I'm protecting my future, I replied. You can have the wedding you want, but not with my money. Daniel walked around my living room like a trapped animal, clearly furious that his plan was falling apart. This isn't over, he said under his breath. There are ways to make an elderly person meet their promises, especially when they're showing signs of mental problems. His words confirmed my worst fears. They were not only after my money but were prepared to question my mental ability if I didn't cooperate. I think it's time for you to leave my house, I said, standing up from my chair with a dignity I hadn't felt in months. And Daniel, I want the keys back that Emily gave you. I'm not giving anything back, he shouted, finally showing his true nature. This house is going to be ours anyway. An old woman living alone in such a large property is a waste. Sooner or later, you're going to need someone to take care of you. You'd better get used to the idea that it's us. His words completely showed the plan they had been doing from the beginning. Get out of my life. Emily screamed at me with a voice I had never heard before. A voice filled with pure hatred that cut through me like a burning knife. Her eyes, which once looked at me with a daughter's love, now shined with a meanness that made me step back without meaning to. If you don't want to be part of my happiness, then don't be part of my life at all. Daniel nodded behind her like a scary chorus. His lips curved into a smile of satisfaction he no longer bothered to hide. Perfect, I replied. My voice came out firmer than I expected. If that's what you really want, Emily, you'll have it. I walked over to the table where I kept my important documents and took out an envelope I had prepared that morning with the help of Mr. Robert. Here is the official cancellation of all the wedding contracts that have my signature. From this moment on, you are completely responsible for all costs. Daniel's face changed from winning to worried in seconds. Wait, Mrs. Linda, you can't do that. There are penalties. There are rules. But I had already looked at every contract with my lawyer and knew exactly what my rights were. I can and I am. All contracts I signed while under emotional pressure have been legally cancelled. If you want to go ahead with the wedding, you will have to pay all the costs yourselves. Emily lunged for the envelope, trying to grab it from me, but I had already put it in my purse. You can't do this to us. Everything is already paid for. Everything is already arranged. Her screams filled my living room, bouncing off the walls that had seen so many happy moments when she was little. Yes, I can, and I already have. Like you said, you want me out of your life. Well, I'm also getting out of your wedding. Daniel grabbed my arm with a force that surprised me. You're going to pay for this, Mrs. Linda. We're going to sue you for breaking the contract, for emotional harm, for everything we can. His mask had fallen completely, showing the terrible man he had always been underneath the perfect future son-in-law act. Let go of me immediately or I'm calling the police, I said, showing him my phone. Do it, Emily screamed at me. Call the police. Tell them your own mother is ruining your wedding. Tell them the woman who gave you life is destroying your happiness. Her words were poison and knives designed to cut me where it hurt most. But something strange had happened inside me. Those words that would have once torn me apart now bounced off me like raindrops on an umbrella. You have no power over me anymore, Emily, I said with a calmness that surprised even me. For 35 years, your happiness was my number one goal. I gave up my dreams, my money, my time, everything for you. But not anymore. I will no longer pay for your show or your control. The words left my mouth like they had been waiting many years to be spoken. Daniel began to pace my living room like a trapped hunter. This isn't over, Mrs. Linda. We have rights. Emily is your only daughter, your only family. When you're old and sick, when you need care, who do you think will be there to help you? His words were a barely hidden threat. Emotional blackmail taken to its extreme. I'd rather be alone than in bad company, I replied. And for the first time in months, I felt I was saying exactly what I thought. And if that's your idea of family, Daniel, then I want nothing to do with you. Emily burst into tears again. But these tears were different. They were tears of rage, of frustration from someone watching something they thought they had secured slip away. You're selfish, she screamed at me. You've been selfish your whole life. You never gave me what I needed. You never gave me what I deserved. Her accusations were so ridiculous they almost made me laugh. I who had worked double shifts to pay for her college. Who had sold my jewelry to buy her a car. Who had lived on the bare minimum so she could always have the best. You know what, Emily, I said, getting up from my chair and walking to the door. You're right. I've been selfish. I've been selfish for letting you treat me like an ATM. I've been selfish for not teaching you the value of money and hard work. I've been selfish for not setting boundaries when I should have. I opened the door wide and pointed them out. You can't kick us out, Daniel shouted. But I had already taken out my phone and called 911. Police. I have 2 people in my house who refuse to leave after I've asked them to. Daniel turned pale when he heard my words and finally started walking towards the door. This isn't over, he said under his breath as he passed me. You're going to regret this, Mom. You're going to regret it when you're all alone and no one remembers you. But her threats no longer affected me. It was like I had developed immunity to her poison after so many years of exposure. Maybe, I replied. But I'd rather regret protecting myself than regret letting you destroy me money-wise. Daniel stopped at the doorway and looked at me with a look I will never forget. You don't know who you're messing with, Mrs. Linda. This is just the beginning. On the contrary, I said, closing the door behind them. This is already over. I locked the deadbolt and stood in my entryway, listening to their angry voices fade down the street. For the first time in months, my house felt like my home again. The silence that followed was not empty but filled with a peace I had forgotten existed. I walked to my favorite chair and sat down, looking out the window at the garden where I had planted jasmine when Emily was little. The flowers had grown and bloomed without my constant attention, feeding on the rain and sun, finding their own way to grow well. Maybe it was time for me to learn to do the same. The next day, the phone started ringing early. It was Sunday, a day I used to spend making family lunches that I now understood had been more a duty than pleasure. Each ring was like a desperate echo of the life I had decided to leave behind. Emily called me every 20 minutes, switching between desperate pleas and hidden threats. Mom, please, we can fix this. You can't just end things with me like this, she said in one message. "You're going to pay the consequences for what you did," she screamed in the next. But I no longer ran to answer the phone like a trained dog. I made my morning coffee with the calmness of someone who has made a final decision and sat in my garden to enjoy the morning sun. It was strange how the same sun that shined yesterday now felt different on my skin. Warmer. More welcome. Like I had gotten back the right to enjoy the simple things in life. At 10 o'clock in the morning, an unfamiliar car pulled up in front of my house. Daniel and an older man I didn't recognize got out, dressed in suits that tried to show authority. They walked straight to my door and knocked with an insistence that bordered on aggression. "Mrs. Linda, we are legal representatives of the Morales Garcia family. We need to speak with you about the contract promises you have broken." "I have no promises to the Garcia family," I replied from behind the locked door. "And if you want to talk about legal matters, you can contact my lawyer." I gave them Mr. Roberts' name and number and watched as Daniel angrily scribbled it on a piece of paper. "Mrs. Linda, this can be solved nicely if you cooperate. There's no need to go to legal action that could be very costly for you." It was the same old blackmail but wrapped in legal words. "My legal representatives are prepared for any action you wish to take," I said, feeling a confidence I hadn't felt in months. "Now, please leave my property or I will call the police for trespassing." I heard them talking to each other before they walked away, but I could catch bits of their conversation. Stubborn, mentally incompetent, other ways. That afternoon my granddaughter Sarah showed up at my door. Unlike her mother and Daniel, she knocked gently and waited for me to open it by choice. Her 16-year-old eyes were swollen from crying, but there was something different in her look. A maturity I hadn't seen before. "Grandma, can I come in? I need to talk to you." Her voice shook, but not with control. With genuine emotion. "Of course, my love," I said, hugging her for the first time in weeks without feeling like I was being judged. Sarah sat on the couch where Daniel had so often planned my money ruin, but her presence cleaned the space of all its previous badness. "Grandma, I heard everything that happened yesterday. Mom and Daniel don't know I'm here. And what do you think about all this?" I asked, preparing myself for another emotional attack. Another person trying to make me feel guilty for protecting my future. But Sarah surprised me with her answer. "I think you did the right thing, Grandma. I've been watching how they've been treating you for months, and it wasn't right. Daniel is a horrible man, and Mom is behaving like someone I don't recognize." Her words were like a healing medicine to my wounded soul. Finally, someone in my family saw what had really been happening. "Your mother is very angry with me," I said, taking her hands in mine. "This might separate us forever." Sarah shook her head. Her eyes shone with a determination that reminded me of myself at her age. "Grandma, I'm not going to choose between you, but I'm also not going to pretend I don't see what's happening. Daniel is filling Mom's head with ideas about your money, your house, your future. I've heard their phone conversations when they think I'm asleep." Her revelations confirmed my worst fears, but they also filled me with pride for my granddaughter's honesty. "What exactly have you heard?" I asked. Sarah took a deep breath before answering. "They talk about real estate agents they've already contacted to see how much the house is worth. Daniel has papers about retirement homes, places where he says you'd be more comfortable. They also mentioned something about your mental inability, about getting medical documents that say you can't manage your own business." The coldness of their plans hit me like ice water. It wasn't just greed. It was a detailed plan to control every part of my life. "Sarah, this is very serious. Would you be willing to repeat this to my lawyer?" She nodded without hesitation. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect you, Grandma. You've always protected me." That night, after Sarah left, promising to come back soon, I stayed up planning my next move. It was no longer just a matter of protecting my money but of protecting my freedom, my independence, my right to grow old with dignity in my own home. Daniel and Emily had declared war, but they didn't know who they were messing with. I took out all the documents I had been collecting over the week. Recordings of conversations, bank statements, cancelled contracts, my granddaughter's testimony. It was a complete set of evidence that showed the pattern of abuse and control I had been suffering. But more important was the proof that my mind was perfectly clear. That my decisions were reasonable and justified. For the first time in months, I fell asleep feeling completely in control of my life. I had taken the reins of my future, had drawn clear boundaries, and had found unexpected allies in my fight for dignity. Tomorrow would be another day of battle, but this time I had the right weapons. And more importantly, I had the iron-willed determination of a woman who had decided that enough was enough. 3 months later, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment. A bright place overlooking the park where children played and elderly couples walked hand in hand. I had sold the big house, the one Daniel had wanted so much, and had moved into a space that was completely mine. Chosen by me. Paid for with my money. Designed for my comfort. Every piece of furniture, every curtain, every potted plant had been a decision I made without asking anyone, without asking permission, without justifying myself to others' expectations. The lawsuit Daniel had promised never came. My lawyer explained that after looking at all the evidence we had collected, including the recordings and Sarah's testimony, any legal action against me would be not only useless but potentially damaging to them. Mrs. Linda, you have a solid case if you wanted to sue them for harassment and money abuse, Mr. Robert had told me. But I had decided I didn't want to spend any more energy on that badness. I just wanted peace. Sarah visited me every Sunday, and our relationship had become deeper and more genuine than ever. Without the pressure of family control, we could talk about everything. Her college plans, her dreams, life in general. "Grandma, do you have any regrets?" she asked me once. "About protecting myself. About getting back my dignity." "Never," I answered. I could see in her eyes that she understood perfectly what had happened. "Mom is very bitter," Sarah told me. "The wedding was cancelled because they couldn't pay for all the promises they had made. Daniel blames her. She blames me for visiting you. And I." Her voice broke a little. "I miss my mom, but I don't miss the toxic environment she had created with him." It was painful to hear about Emily's suffering, but it was also confirmation that Daniel had never been the solution to my daughter's problems but the cause of many new ones. "Do you know what I've learned, Sarah?" I said, stroking her young hands that so resembled mine at her age. "I've learned that true love isn't shown by sacrificing yourself to the point of self-destruction. It's shown by setting healthy boundaries, teaching values, and keeping your own integrity so you can give from a place of strength, not emptiness." My words rang in the air like a lesson it had taken me 65 years to learn. One afternoon, while watering the plants in my new container garden, I saw Emily standing across the street. She looked thinner, paler, and there was something defeated in her posture that broke my heart. Our eyes met for a moment that felt eternal, filled with everything we had lost and everything we could have had. She raised her hand as if to wave but then let it fall and walked away without a word. I didn't run after her. I didn't shout her name. I didn't open the door to beg her to talk. For the first time in her life, I let Emily walk away without chasing her, without trying to fix what she had broken. I had learned that some doors can only be opened from the inside, and that my role as a mother was not to force reunions but to be available if one day she decided to seek me out with genuine intentions. That night Sarah called me crying. "Grandma, Mom is doing really bad. Daniel left her when he realized there was no more money to be gotten from us. He left with all his things and left her with debts from the wedding that never happened." My heart squeezed hearing about my daughter's pain, but I also felt a strange sense of justice. Daniel had finally shown his true colors, just as I had predicted. "Do you want me to go see her?" I asked Sarah, knowing that any approach from me could be misunderstood or rejected. "I don't know, Grandma. She's very proud, very hurt. But I think deep down she knows you were right about him." My 16-year-old granddaughter's wisdom constantly impressed me. She had seen firsthand what control could do to a family, and she had chosen the side of honesty. 6 months after I last saw Emily on the street, I received a letter. Not a text message, not a call, but a handwritten letter on paper I recognized as the stationery I had given her years ago. "Mom," it began. "I know I have no right to write to you after everything that happened, but I need you to know that I understand now what Daniel really was. I also understand that my actions were unforgivable." The letter continued with apologies that sounded genuine, with acknowledgments of mistakes that seemed to come from a place of real pain, not control. "I'm not writing to ask for money or for you to rescue me from the consequences of my decisions. I'm writing because I want you to know that I admire you for standing up for yourself when I wasn't able to stand up for you." Tears streamed down my cheeks as I read words I had been waiting to hear for months. "If you can ever forgive me, I would like to try to rebuild our relationship from scratch. As two adults who respect each other, not as a mother and daughter trapped in toxic patterns of the past." It was signed simply Emily, not your daughter like she used to do. Like she understood that family titles had to be earned, not taken for granted. That afternoon, as the sun set on my new life, I planted a mint seedling in a new pot. Mint, the plant seller had explained, was tough and constantly grew back, even after being cut. As I buried the small roots in the fresh soil, I thought about second chances. About forgiveness that comes from strength, not weakness. About the possibility of something beautiful growing in the place where there had once been so much pain. I didn't know if Emily and I would ever be mother and daughter again in the traditional sense. But for the first time in years, I had hope that we could be something better. Two women who respected each other, loved each other from an appropriate distance, and had learned that true love sometimes requires painful but necessary boundaries. I closed my eyes and breathed in the scent of fresh mint, knowing that I had found my way back to myself.